I'm Ali Zendrian, and this is the Financial Services News You Might Have Missed podcast. This is where I uncover news gems that might not have gotten their chance to sparkle as much as they should have, and I dust them off a little bit. I'm joined by my trusted co-host and personal financial advisor, Brandon Galisi of Galisi Financial. Brandon, how are you doing?
Ali, I'm doing great today. And for those that are watching, we record this on Riverside, so we have the video aspect of this as well. It might look like I just stepped off of a golf course, and that would be partially true because I did golf with a buddy this morning, and I'm still wearing my golf polo, a little Callaway polo here. So for those that are watching, be able to see. So it was a good way to start out the Thursday. And then I've got a little bit later of a meeting today. So again, one of the big benefits that you and I both have of being entrepreneurs is we get to set that schedule. So we want to take off a morning and then work a little bit later. Of course, we've got other family responsibilities, and my wife and I don't yet have kids. So understandably, I have less responsibilities, to be fair, but it's still nice to have that flexibility as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, but you do have Perla. I don't know to what extent she's needy.
I mean, we'll get I can't say it out loud, so I'll say Kamina later today. WALK. We'll get that in for sure later.
Okay, there you go. Well, speaking of Brandon, so before we start our news for the week, I would just personally like to point out that Brandon astutely and quickly put two and two together when it comes to Robinhood's new social media platform. He had said 2 weeks ago that it could be, quote unquote, the blind leading the blind. I said something a little more wordsy, but I just wanted to call that out because there was a story in investment news that cited Jason Wink saying that on September 22nd. So you heard it here first.
Yeah. Hey, we'll take that. And also anything that Jason Wink is doing is super innovative, great thought leader. So we'll take that. Great minds think alike. And I definitely really respect his thinking. So that was cool.
But now on to the news. Our first piece of news this week is Capgemini Research Institute's World Payments Report. It found that there's a gap between what merchants want and what banks are able to provide. Onboarding a merchant can take on average 7 days and cost about $496. And by comparison, payment techs can take an hour on average and does it for about half the cost. It does seem like this is a great opportunity for banks to stop kind of being the sleepy banks and be much more forward thinking, but I was curious what you think.
Yeah, I wasn't actually terribly surprised. I didn't know the stats, of course, before reading the article, but the fact that the big banks are, I like that terminology that you just used there, being a bit sleepy on this trend, not terribly surprising, where the smaller companies that are likely able to be more nimble, can innovate a bit quicker, are really performing quite well, I think is what we're seeing. And I thought was interesting, and I kind of draw a parallel to even our industry, the financial planning industry, where oftentimes you see these big firms, they're moving like very large ships, which is not quick, right? And understandably so. I mean, when you have a massive ship, it is much harder to move that massive ship compared to something much smaller and much more nimble, like a lot of the independent RIAs that are going to be out there. And I think we're seeing similar things where the independent RIAs, or this smaller by comparison size, are able to move much quicker, are able to be much more innovative. And, we're seeing it in the payment space too.
You're absolutely right. And it's interesting because on the one side, you feel like, well, there's the safety or the provenness of the big ship moving, that you're not worried that it's going to sink. But you're right. On the other hand, the smaller boat could easily beat you. So you got to wonder what balance of that you want to have.
Right. And what you're ultimately trying to solve for, because if you're able to get payments up and running in substantially more fast and for half the cost, why? Assuming everything's compliant and you're not worried about any data breaches or anything like that. Again, I feel like I would assume that the majority of these companies have all sorts of things that I wouldn't even know about, but encryption and other jargony cybersecurity words, making sure everything is super safe, even if they're a bit smaller. But maybe we see the big banks buy up some of those companies instead of trying to build it themselves. Not 100% sure, but getting things set up quicker so you can get paid faster seems like a win for the businesses.
Yes, that all smells correct. So
Yeah.
let's see what happens. Our second piece of news this week is from the CFP board. It's Lessons Learned, a survey in American Gen Xers. What struck me when I first saw this was the headline, "Don't Let Financial Reality Bite." So good job there on that headline. That sucked me right in. This survey found that 48% of Gen X thinks its financial mistakes have cost them at least $100,000 over their lifetime, while 13% think it's more like $500,000. Which is a lot to think about, and the emotional weight of just having to grasp that is a lot. Their general advice to younger generations is that we should start saving for retirement sooner, have an emergency fund, and start investing ASAP. I would think that you tend to agree with that, but what do you think?
Absolutely. And I feel like each generation pretty much echoes some version of that of I wish I started sooner, or I thought I had more time. And I feel at this age, Gen X, which is probably mid 40s to maybe getting close to 60s, at least that's, I think off the top of my head, probably somewhere in that ballpark. So it makes sense. They're getting into that true pre-retiree phase, which makes sense why they're like, oh, I wish I would have, only I could have started sooner. Not surprised. And with you being on, again, we're both millennials, but probably some folks that are a little bit older than you would fall into that Gen X category. Have you kind of seen this even from an anecdotal perspective?
I might be dating somebody who is a Gen Xer. Has he talked about this? I feel like he's more acutely aware and concerned about his retirement, whereas especially I've only been in business about a year and a half. It's more like, let's get the ship righted and get the clients going and this and that. So I take it in a few more years when I hit that number, maybe I'll start feeling that way too.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. And then I did actually, I came with some research to this one. To be fair, I had already done this and created some content around it. But right along the same lines, there was this Transamerica study called The Post-Pandemic Realities, the Retirement Outlook of the Multi-Generational Workforce. So that's a lot of words, but I promise what I'm going to say next is way more simple. It essentially showed what was the median age that each generation started saving. And you'll notice a trend here pretty quickly. So boomers, 85% are currently saving, and the median start age of saving was 35. Gen X, 81% are saving, so a little bit less, but they started 5 years earlier on median, so the median age of 30 for Gen X. Millennials, 78% are currently saving. They started at age 25. So far, we're 35, 30, then 25. And then actually Gen Z, 66% are already saving with a median starting age of 6 years earlier than even millennials. So I think a lot of this advice keeps coming down from generation to generation. Hey, you should start saving earlier. I think especially since we're more reliant on 401ks, less on pensions, it's even more important. So the advice from Gen X, we're kind of seeing that already happening for at least some of the folks in these generations.
I love that you brought extra research to the table, so thank you for doing that. I would be curious though, and it boggles my mind that my kids are Gen Alpha, but so does that count then, a parent opens IRA for a child or the 529s or whatnot, like is that associated then with the kid? Because in some cases you would think then it started shortly after birth.
I would have to check the study to see how they did it. If I had to go gut feeling, I would assume no, because that wouldn't really be them saving, to your point, because then be like, oh, I started saving at 2 months old. No, well, your parents did, or your parents opened that IRA for you when you were 16. So yeah, I don't know. Likely, maybe it was someone just kids just opening a Robinhood account or something like that whenever they're 19 and investing something. But just the fact that they're thinking about investing more and at an earlier age, I think is very positive, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. May we each learn from each other's lessons.
Yeah. I mean, that's the goal. Each generation theoretically should have more information and have more technology and more, hopefully, opportunity than the previous. That's at least the goal. Does it always work that way? No, but it's the goal.
Yeah. Well, moving on to our third piece of news, this is from CoreData research. It found that 63% of investors factor thought leadership into how favorably they view investment managers. It also notes that investors want to see actionable insights on geopolitical and other areas. Another thing that I found interesting was that 49% said that thought leadership helps validate their manager's expertise. So selfishly, as somebody who throws around the word thought leadership for a living, this was like, wow, I love when somebody validates my work. But I'd be curious what you think on the financial side of things.
Yeah, well, no, I'm curious to get your take first. I mean, obviously, it's good for the industry that you're in, so you're going to be in favor of it. But I want to hear your thoughts, and I've got some of my own too.
Well, so first of all, I appreciate the fact that it validates that thought leadership is really important, because I think it's one of those things that we say, and because PR is not one of these like you put out an article and then a client finds you and then they give you $500,000. It doesn't follow that way. So the fact that somebody can correlate it in that manner is great. I think it's also interesting though. So the fact that the investors wanted like very specific and actionable insights. So that's something with thought leadership. People used to be able to get away with the vague but like well-written article, and nowadays that just doesn't cut it anymore. So the fact that even the investor is saying, you really got to get specific, I think was great too.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out, because thought leadership before could just be a canned article that is basically, you said vague, applies to no one really. It's like a very high level, not actionable at all. So it is cool that they kind of even defined a bit more on, because thought leadership, you probably could ask 10 people, get 10 different definitions, but how they started to define it at least a little bit with that. And then I did one of the quotes from the article right along these same lines, Allie, was the challenge is producing content that drives behavior. And I very much echo that. It can be challenging, especially when you have, maybe only 60 seconds to capture someone's attention and deliver a message and somehow get them to take action. But right, I do think it's really validating. And the reasons I think thought leadership, and again, especially when it's more specific or at least more thoughtful and not just canned content, is simply you're going to be more top of mind. Even if someone is not reading all of the economic updates, for example, say for an asset manager, if they are just constantly seeing them show up in their email inbox on a regular basis, even if they don't read them, they're going to think, oh, they're a thought leader, even if they might not be reading their thoughts. So I think that's very underlooked. And to your point, Allie, because you can't correlate, oh, they read this one email, I was such a good email writer, and they became a client. It's like, it doesn't work like that, which makes it tougher. But if you do it for long enough, you start hearing, oh, I was referred to you, but then I saw your content, or I came and saw your content and then wanted to reach out. So once you start hearing more of those stories, then you're like, oh, okay, there is something to this. But yeah, definitely thought leadership, super important.
Yeah. So one of the things in financial advice, anyway, it seems like certain people are comfortable, a la yourself, of creating content and putting themselves out there. And then there are just certain people where, whether it's compliance issues or don't want to do it, don't have time, whatever it is, make that excuse for not doing it. And I think obviously this is only one study, but it is showing the importance of it. So I would be curious if this would push anybody over the edge to say, yeah, I'm going to make some time to do this.
Yeah, well, I would hope so. And even for you, you're absolutely a thought leader. I mean, we're both on this podcast together, but you've crossed, I can't remember, a substantial amount of followers though on LinkedIn. And I see your posts. People are engaging. So even just anecdotally, what's your personal experience, not just from your professional side, but even for your own business, what's your experience been? And because again, I would absolutely call you a thought leader. You're constantly posting content. So what's that personal experience been like for you as you've been building your business over the last year and a half?
Well, right after this, I'm turning it back on you, sir. But over the last year and a half, so I have to say, I mean, it's different for me because, so anybody who hasn't listened to this podcast before, I was a reporter, so I enjoy these things. Among the reasons that I have two podcasts, in addition to adding thought leadership to the market, is that I genuinely enjoy doing it. So it makes it easier later at night to edit them. I think, though, it does say a lot, because then the weeks that you feel like, like, do I really still have to do this? I don't know. Is it really turning anything around? And then whether it's a client all of a sudden becomes part of your life because of your thought leadership, or you just, like you said, noticing that you're rising up, other people are thinking of you differently, you're getting more followers. It does add up. It does certainly take time, and there can be times that you're just like, I don't feel like it. I'm sick. I'm tired. I just don't want to do it. But it's worth doing.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I love that last part too. We're not always going to feel like doing it. And again, I would look at you as someone who is incredibly consistent and doing a great job on social media, also bringing in clients from social media. So even objectively successful. And you're even saying, hey, there's certain times I'm just not feeling it as much, but you still are able to push through because you value it. And more often than not, likely it gives you energy to do these things. But I think it's also important to know, just because you might feel some discomfort, or because, 100% of the time you're not feeling like creating content, that's okay. Like, that's super normal. In fact, if you were 100% of the time ready to create content, like, I want to know what you're doing, because even I've listened to different podcasts of some of the most successful creators, and even they're like, what their process is, oftentimes they sit down and start writing, speaking, whatever their medium is, and that's it. They're like, that's how I create the muse, or they get the inspiration. It's like, I dedicate time and spend time at this. Like, okay, great. It's a great framework to follow.
Yeah. Well, just tagging on to that. So for anybody who does feel like it's difficult to do something like this, so somebody who's recently come into my life, and I very much appreciate, is Laura Garfield from Idea Decanter. So you may be familiar. They help advisors create great video content. She is a great thought leader in this space, and has literally laid out the process of do this, and do this, and then you will get the result. So whether you like what Brandon and I are saying and just feel like, okay, you told me to do thought leadership, but now what am I supposed to do? there are people who are telling you how to do it. So if you want to look her up, she will help you get into that headspace.
Yeah. And I think it's really smart to utilize resources in this space too, because if you think that you're just going to show up sporadically, it's not going to work. And we hear stories all the time. Well, content marketing doesn't work, but there's so many stories of it actually working. Now, again, if it's sporadic, there's not a purpose behind it. And again, if you want to take out a lot of the guesswork, connect with a professional like that. Yeah, that's a great call out.
Oh, thank you. So our final piece of news this week, since we've kind of strayed a little bit into corporate culture and whatnot, I figured I would just go with it. goBeyondProfit had its 2025 Generosity by the Generations report, which found that 40% of Gen Z and millennials are looking for new work opportunities, and 43% of Gen Z employees said they already left a job because of its quote-unquote lack of generosity. The report also found that Gen X appreciates flexibility in being able to work from home and work hours and whatnot, while Gen Z prioritizes mental health over flexible work situations. So I thought that this was, in a way, some of the stuff that I already anticipated, but I appreciate the fact that we're codifying it and that people are starting to think about it this way, because maybe then we will get to those kind of cultures where you see certain businesses and it just seems like everybody is so excited to be there, and on social media it seems that way, but you actually show up in person and they're all similarly thrilled, so you know that they're not just faking it for social media. Right. May we be able to create those environments, because I feel like that's where people produce their best, is when you're happy and excited to be there. But that's right. My 2 cents.
No, I agree. I mean, that's the best business. It's a win across the board. The company ends up driving more profits because employees are happier, therefore likely also more productive. Their quality of life goes up. So it's not like, oh, we just want to get more productivity out of these workers. Like, yes, you get more productivity, but because they have a higher quality of life in general. And then typically when you have, good profits, happy employees, who then also benefits? Probably the customers too. So now you've got this win across the board. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, but that's my humble opinion. That's when business is thriving. Whatever the business is, when everyone's winning, that's the best type of businesses. And those are the most fun as a customer. Those are the most fun businesses to support. As an employee, the best ones to work at. And as a shareholder, even maybe if we get into the investment, probably good too, because they're driving profits long-term as well. So that was a solid win across the board.
Love it. Just wrapping up, as I was trying to pinpoint a time when I don't really like doing thought leadership. So I always enjoy our conversations. I have to say there are weeks, this was not one of them. Actually, this week, I actually was able to pass up things that looked good. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I feel like I could do better, and kept going, and I got better, which was nice. But there have been some weeks where, whether the news well is dry or whatever it is, you're just like, oh man, like this is what I got. Like, come on. But thank you for always making it a pleasure to be part of this and to have a thoughtful conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And likewise. And I feel like even those weeks that, again, sometimes it's just the news well, like you say, is a bit drier. I will say, and this could be advice for others too, whenever it's a collaborative discussion like this, like you and I are able to have fun conversations, even if the news isn't the most exciting on a particular week, it does make it even easier to show up. One, accountable, because it would be kind of lame if either of us just didn't show up and for no reason, right? Of course, emergencies happen and whatnot. That's a different conversation. If we just, I'm not feeling it today, I'm not going to tell Allie I'm not showing up. Obviously, that would be rude. So there's that built-in accountability. But then also, too, once we start talking, sometimes like, I think this is going to be a short show. How many times have we said that? And then we go on for, 20, 30 minutes, way longer than we initially thought, just because we started flowing back and forth, which makes it fun. Even if, like you said, even if the news well's dry, we're still going to have fun.
Yeah. So I appreciate that about it, but you're absolutely right. After probably like 5 weeks or so that I was like, oh, we're going to get this done real quick.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Right. Yeah. Again, but that's the beauty of the thought leadership and creating content. And again, just having that system in place too makes it easier. We show up and we know what we're going to talk about. And sometimes we go other directions that we didn't even know, but it ends up being fun. And hopefully the listeners, I mean, if they're listening at this point, they clearly care enough to listen to the end. So we appreciate all of you for listening to us chat back and forth as well.
Yes. Thank you. Well done. Nice ending. Beautiful.